Okay, so today we're going to start up in SketchUp. So we're shifting out of the world of AutoCAD into SketchUp. We will be in SketchUp is the only new piece of software we're learning for the rest of the semester. But we're going to start folding SketchUp back into Photoshop quite a bit, and we'll do some InDesign stuff. We'll revisit our portfolios, which remember are due at the end. So it's kind of coming down to it. There's not that many days left, but at the same time, I think this is kind of the more fun part of the semester where we really get to combine stuff together and get some pretty good looking stuff. I'm going to split today's lecture into two parts. The first part, I'm going to talk a little bit about SketchUp, and then the second part, I'll talk about your first kind of bringing some SketchUp output into Photoshop and do a little bit with it. So it seems to work better as a two-part lecture where you have some time to work on the cube house. Those of you that have taken 130 probably had to draw this already once. You're probably rather bored with it by now, but at the same time, it's a really good way of getting used to how SketchUp works. How many people have used SketchUp before? Okay, it's amazing. When I first asked that question, whatever, 7 years ago when I first started teaching the class, nobody raised their hand, right? And so it's definitely changed in terms of prominence and how many people are using it. We unfortunately are stuck in the world of SketchUp 2013 instead of 2015, but you're welcome to download it on your own computer and model on your own computer. You can bring your laptop if you'd rather work on your laptop than the lab computer, that's fine. If you work at home and then want to bring it in to work on something in here, remember you have to go back and save it as a SketchUp 2013 file so you can open it here. I will see what I can do about getting some updates installed. I don't want to make any promises though. Those things take time. So I'm not, sorry, I'm obviously still fighting my voice. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time teaching you the basics of SketchUp because I feel like most people already have a really good grasp on SketchUp to begin with. If you're brand new and have never played in SketchUp before and you're struggling, let me know. We'll sit down, we'll go through some stuff. But I do like to try to point out things that might be less common and therefore kind of talk through it. So I should actually start from opening it from scratch here. I'm going to open SketchUp 2013. We have SketchUp 8 too, which is the version before SketchUp 2013, so I'll do 2013. That will then bring up this Welcome to SketchUp window, and in the Welcome to SketchUp window, most of this information is kind of irrelevant. The only thing that really matters is down here under Template. And this is where we can select what kind of a template we want to use as a base for our drawing. Generally, whether you're in the simple template feet and inches or whether you're in the architectural design feet and inches, doesn't matter, but you'll want to be in one or the other of those. So if I select it as architectural design and then I say start using SketchUp, it will then open my scene. It works in a 3D modeling world where we have kind of a ground plane that's identified by the X and Y axis, the red axis and the green axis in the world of SketchUp. And anything going up is in the Z axis, which would be blue. So it gives us kind of a sense. I have the default tool set shown, but also the large tool set, and that's saved on my computer, but I don't know if on everybody's it is. So if yours looks slightly different than mine, you can get the large tool set by going to View, Toolbars, and then checking the box for large tool set, and it'll show up top. It just gives a few more options that are available. If you want to navigate around the scene, we have a couple options here. One is the orbit command. The orbit allows us to click and then rotate what we're looking at. The pan command allows us to pan back and forth. Okay? Zoom and zoom all, zoom extents are exactly what they're saying. I tend to use the scroll wheel on the mouse to do my zooming in and zooming out. That's fine. The other thing is I will warn you, the world of Rhino, you right click to orbit, and so many times when I'm trying to demo something, I will right click to try to orbit and it won't work, but that's just the way it works. It's habit on my end. So when we first open SketchUp in this file, it comes with a person to give us some sense of scale. The person doesn't really give us much. You're welcome to leave the person, or you're welcome to select the person and then press the delete key and make the person go away. It really doesn't matter. And so what we're drawing today is the Francis Ching cube house, which is built on a 4-foot cube. So the easiest thing to do would be to start building some pieces of this. So I'm going to start with the rectangle. And when I click on the rectangle tool, when I come down here to draw, I'm going to click and drag, and you're going to see that the rectangle will start to show. Now, I know that I want it to be a specific size, and so I still haven't let go of my mouse yet. And we see down here, and this is really hard for me to hold on to the mouse and walk over it and show you, but down here, there's some dimensions that have been measured. Okay? If I want to type in dimensions, right, while I'm still holding the mouse down, which I am, I'm going to type 4 and then the little apostrophe. And you see how down there it shows 4 with the apostrophe? The apostrophe means feet. And then I can say comma 4 feet. And then I can hit enter on the keyboard, and it will then draw my square at 4 feet by 4 feet. Does that make sense in terms of being able to specify a dimension? The next thing that I can do is I can use what's called the push-pull tool, which is a kind of a rectangle with an arrow on it. And then I can click and drag to give myself that third dimension of this particular shape. I know it's going to be 4 feet again because it's a 4-foot cube, so I can go ahead and type 4 feet, and then I'll hit enter. Okay? And so that gives me kind of the base module that I'm going to be building my building out of. And so what I can do from here is I can select this object, and then I can copy it and paste it. And I want to show you a couple things in how you're doing this. So if I copy and then I paste, right, it comes in, and I'm connected to this corner. And when I move them close together, see how they kind of jump together? That means they're then connected. Now the problem here is that when you make objects in SketchUp, they become connected together. And so if I were to take, say, the move tool, right, and I were to try to move this after I snap them together, you see how one of the cubes gets bigger? Right? It's because that's how SketchUp works. They magnetically attach to one another. And so to combat that, instead of just copying this object, I'm actually going to group the object first. So I'm going to select the object here. I'm going to right click on the object and say make group. And when I do that, it's going to become a cube rather than individual faces of an object. I can then copy it and I can paste it. And when I connect these grouped objects together, if I go to move them, they'll come apart rather than stay glued together. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do today is to go ahead and make these objects and then make it a group, and then we can go ahead and start to build out the rest of the cube house. Okay? So I can copy and paste, Control-C, Control-V, to create multiple of these cubes. The other thing that I can do is while I have the Move tool active, I can hold down the Control key, and you see that my Move tool changes to have a little plus next to it. You're going to see that little plus. It means it's going to be copying as I move. And so I can move from, say, here, there. Right? Again, hold down Control, move from here to there. Okay, so it's a little bit faster than copy, paste, and then move. All right? One of the things that's important to recognize is when I move close to a corner, I get a little purple circle. Right? That's a snap. It means I'm snapping to the end point. I'll also get a purple circle at the middle. That means I'm snapping to the middle as I'm going through. So I'll go ahead and use Control. And this is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We need 7. And then 8. So I have 8 that have been put together. Right? Let me just double check on my thing here. Right, it's 8. Right? Then I can take these 8 and I'll hold down Shift to select them all. Right? And then I can go back to, there I am, right clicking to orbit. Told you it's going to happen. Let me go to the Move tool. I can hold down Control to copy, right? And I can copy backwards in this direction. Right, etc. You get kind of how those come together. Now, there's a couple special pieces in the front. There's a ramp on one side, and there's also a little triangle set that pops out. And so one of the things that happens in the world of SketchUp is that we can then divide geometry, right, into more pieces if we want. And so I'm going to take the first 3 cubes here, 1, 2, and 3, and right now they're grouped, and I'm going to ungroup them or explode them. And let's see, it's right here under explode. I just right click on it and click explode, right? And that makes these individual objects that I can then start to work with. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll come up here to my pencil tool or my line tool, and I'm going to draw a line on this face that goes diagonally from this corner down to that corner. And when I do that, you see that it divides this face into 2 separate pieces. So I have a piece there and a piece there. Okay? Ultimately, I'm going to get rid of this piece. So I can select it, press delete, this piece, that piece. Okay? Now I need, if we look inside here, I don't have the back surface divided up yet. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to that line tool, and I'll draw from this corner down to this corner. And it divides up the back section. Okay? Notice that it also, because I have an enclosed shape here, it fills in the ramp. Okay? So I can go ahead and continue with a few deletes. Get rid of this piece, and that piece. Okay? And if I look at the front here, I'm safe to get rid of this piece, right, and these top pieces. Okay, so I'm getting there on the ramp. But I have this piece right now that goes all the way through. Okay, I need to divide this along that line. So I'm going to create one more line that goes from this point to that point, which then separates the surface, and I can then delete that surface. I'll do a line from here to there, and then I'll delete this surface as well. So now I have the ramp, but I have a few extra lines that are still there. So I'm going to get rid of those, and sometimes just in the way that you orbit, you can have an easier time selecting things, right? So instead of trying to select down where I'm clicking on top of an object, I'll actually move this so I'm looking up toward the sky, and I can click and drag a box through these objects and delete them more as one group rather than individually. Okay? So I now have that ramp drawn, which is pretty good, but now I need that triangular piece that sticks out in the front here. Okay? So I could, right, copy these 2 cubes out, right, or I can draw them from scratch. Okay? So I'm going to draw them from scratch just for contrast here. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to draw in this direction. Notice that there's a line that shows up green when I'm on axis. That means it's going to be straight. And I know it needs to go out 4 feet, so I'll type 4 feet and then enter. And then I'll go ahead and draw that diagonal there. And then I'll draw this diagonal there. Okay? So now I have these surfaces there and there. And I could draw the rest. Right? I could start here again and draw at the top and then connect them. Or I can go back to my push-pull tool, right, and just pull this. Whoops, sorry about that. Just pull this up to match there, and to pull this up to match there. All right. If you end up with one of these that's a different color, don't worry about it for right now. That's fine. All right. So as I continue on, right, I'm just going to continue to build this up. I like to build with the big blocks and then divide the big blocks into smaller pieces as necessary. So if I were to start this building, let's see, it's 2 back, 1, 2, it would be right here. Take this and that one. And that. And I'm going to use move. Now those 2 didn't quite snap, so I want to move them again to make sure that they actually snap together. There we go. Right? Now this needs to be divided up a little bit. It looks like I have 2 foot by 2 foot cubes in the front here. So I will right click on these objects and select explode, and then I'm just going to divide these up like that. Something like that. Do the same thing here. Alright, so I'm just drawing on the surfaces, but once these are separate, I can use that push-pull tool to adjust these surfaces. So this needs to go back into there. This one needs to go back into there. Okay. And oh, looks like I put that line in the wrong place. Let me go ahead and just delete that line. And I'll redraw a line at that midpoint. There. So we'll also draw this back to there. And it looks like these are little cubes too. So I'm doing this by dividing up an existing cube. The other option that you would have would be to create a small 2x2 cube. So I could say 2 feet, 2 feet, and then I can push pull up 2 feet like that. I can group this. First make group, and then I can go ahead and move that up into place, and I can start building it up with blocks that way. So it depends on whether you want to divide things up or you want to just keep adding little blocks to it. But that's the basics of kind of how it works. So at this point, I'm going to let you go. You're going to be doing part 1. It's 8:30 right now, 8:35, something like that. I'd say you probably get an hour and a half for this. So at 10, I'll come back and we'll talk through the Photoshop section, and you'll do a little bit of Photoshop post-processing on this one, right? So try to get the bulk of your model done. If you don't quite have everything done, it's okay. If you finish early and you want to add extra detail to it, that's fine. It's kind of up to you in terms of how you want it to look. I do also have grade sheets that I'm going to pass out today. Today is this week is the last week to withdraw. Right? I really don't like to withdraw people, but if you're really concerned, let's sit down and have a chat, and you guys can decide what you want to do about it. Okay? Okay, so it's just before 10, and as I promised, I'm going to split the lecture into 2 different parts. So however far you got with the cube house is far enough. You won't get graded down if you didn't finish it, or you have unfinished pieces, or if you embellished it. It makes no difference. The next part of this that we're going to talk about is how do you get higher quality output out of SketchUp? How do you make something look better? This will be broken into multiple parts as we go forward, because it takes a while to learn all of the various components. Today we're dealing with kind of just very basics of bringing it into Photoshop and making it look better. So one of the fundamental problems with SketchUp is that all SketchUp drawings look like SketchUp drawings, and we need to find a way to make them not look like SketchUp drawings. I remember back when I was in school, one of the big critiques always was, oh, you did that in SketchUp. And for whatever reason, SketchUp's had a bad name in the world of architecture because it's cheap, because it's free, and because, you know, anybody can pick it up and model in it. And so there are a number of professors that you will encounter going forward that have a bit of a chip on their shoulder that say, oh, you did it in SketchUp, therefore it can't be any good. My goal is to make it so that you can do all your work in SketchUp and it doesn't make any difference. The truth of that is I had a friend of mine in grad school who came in doing all of his modeling in SketchUp, and he did some of the most beautiful SketchUp stuff I've ever seen. And so it's very doable, but at the same time it would get to a final review, and if he didn't change it to not look like SketchUp anymore, he'd get blasted for it looks like a SketchUp. So anyway, we're going to try to modify it so that it doesn't look like a SketchUp. And there's been a lot of things that have happened in the world of of SketchUp that make it look a lot better. So it's definitely improving on its own, but we're going to try to enhance it that much more. So I have the cube house here finished. This is the finished version of it. And I need to start to create some outputs. And so the things that I'm going to talk about are all written out in the SketchUp tutorials in the book and also online. We're going to go through 4.3, 4.4, and 4.5 right now. The 4.4 is kind of the big one, but we're going to reference 4.5 and 4.3. So I'm going to start first with 4.3, which is adding shadows just so that we can see what the shadows look like. This is one thing that's conveniently built into SketchUp. The shadows aren't truly accurate shadows from a lighting standpoint, but they're reasonable and they give us kind of an approximation of what the shadows would look like on any given day. So there's two parts to shadows in SketchUp. The first part is that you have to open the shadow window that gives you control over the shadows. And so that's under Window and then Shadows. And that'll bring up the shadow settings box here. And the other thing is that you actually have to turn on the shadows in the first place. So if you go to View and then check the box for shadows, the shadows turn on. So it's kind of that two-part thing. If we look at the shadow settings box here, we have the ability to change, one, the time of day. And so you can see that I can use a slider here that's going to change the time of day and therefore change what the shadows look like on my building. And then I also have a date slider that will let me change the day of the year, and you can see how the shadows change over the course of the day of the year. So what we're looking at doing today is getting some shadow that looks kind of good. Okay, I'm not going to specify, oh, it has to be this time of day or whatever. You can pick whatever time looks appropriate to you. Okay. The other thing that I'm going to ask you to do is with the orbit tool, I'm going to ask you to kind of zoom in, zoom out, and set up a view that looks like a nice view. Okay, we'll talk about what constitutes a nice view a little bit later on, getting a good perspective and that sort of thing. I don't care whether you're doing more of a bird's eye view or whether you're doing more of a level in view. It's really up to you. Something like that. Once you have the view established the way you want it, I'm going to flip over to tutorial 4.5 in that you want to be able to save this view so that you can come back to it over and over again. And when you start to do lots of exports, if you accidentally hit the orbit command or the pan command and then your exports don't line up anymore when you're dropping them into Photoshop, you just want to be able to go back to whatever that is. Kind of like those of you that have taken Rhino, when I tell you to save your view in Rhino before you start renders, because you can go back and make modifications and come back to that view. So it's not called a view in SketchUp, it's called a scene. So I'm going to go to Window and then click on Scenes, and that will bring up this Scenes dialog box. I already have a couple scenes saved, but I'm going to save a new one. And to do that, I'm going to click on the little plus sign, and you'll see that this is called Scene 3. I think I can double click on it, or I can click on some kind of edit information here. Hold on. Right click on it and say Rename Scene. There we go. And I'm going to call this Spring 2015 Export, or whatever. Okay. So now that that's saved, the advantage here is that I can double click on it to go to whatever scene. So if I wanted to be in scene 1, I can double click on it. That was scene 1. Right? I also have tabs that run across here at the top, so I can switch to scene 2. Notice that it saves the sun settings in addition, which is good. So I have this set up and established. This is the view that I'm going to end up exporting. Now I'm going to reference and go back and forth with this SketchUp 4.4 styles for Photoshop. This is what I'm going to be going through, and there's a variety of on and off checkboxes. Now I've set this out to be kind of a general guide for doing exports to Photoshop. When you do this, not every one of them will apply. If you didn't use any guides, for example, when you did your drawing, it doesn't make any sense to have a guides export because you don't have any to show. So you'll have to do some editing about what's really appropriate and what's not appropriate when you're doing these exports. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up. I'm going to navigate to my styles. So I'm going to go to Window and then Styles, and I'm going to pick this hidden line view. all right, which should be under default styles, like in the second row here. It looks kind of like a wireframe a little bit. And I'm going to make sure that that is clicked as my primary. So for example, I could change my view to be something else. When I click on this hidden line, I'm going to see just the basic lines. Okay. Then as we continue to reference, right, I want to turn on my shadows, which they're currently on already. Or excuse me, I want to turn off my shadows. Right. So I'm going to go to View, Uncheck Shadows. Okay. So I have just lines now, which is good. The other thing that's showing up is, you see how I have the red, green, and blue axes? I'd really like those to go away. I don't want those in my final drawing. So I'm going to go up to View, and I'm going to turn off axes, and those go off as well. Right? So what I'm really looking for is a very basic line drawing of my model, okay, which is what I have here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to File, Export 2D Graphic. Okay, and I'm going to save this onto my flash drive. But before I click OK, I am going to click on Options. So let me navigate to my flash drive. And I'm going to create a new folder for 2015. And I'm going to dump it right in here. Okay, so this one is, I usually add something. We'll call this the Francis Ching Cube House, and it's going to be lines. And I'm going to click on Options. Now, Options give me some ability to adjust what the quality of the JPEG is that's coming out. Right? And so one of the things you want to be aware of is, what is the final size of this going to be? Okay, so if I was doing one of the big presentation boards in the back, right, and I knew that I wanted this to be the showcase graphic, and it was going to be, you know, I don't know, 30 inches, right, in size and width, right? If I'm printing, the printer can print 300 pixels per inch, right, or 300 dots per inch. So I need to do some math, right? If I wanted it to be 30 inches, and I had 300 per inch, I'd need 9,000 pixels. Right, to be able to create a good quality output. For what we're doing for right now, yeah, 3,000 by 1355, that sounds good. I do always slide to best quality, right, so that's there. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And this is Francis Ching Cube House lines. So I'll go ahead and click Export, and it'll make that first export for me. Okay, again, it's just the basic lines. So now, I'm not going to orbit, I'm not going to select anything, I'm just going to go through and make some changes to what's coming out. Right? So I have the first one, which is the line, so here it is. Right? It looks like I said 2,000 pixels wide. I did 3,000 here. It's close enough. Okay. Next one, right? I'm going to click on the Edit button in the middle of the styles. Right? So here I am. I'm going to click on the Edit button. Right? And let me hold on one second. Right? And then I'm going to click on the Xray button. So there is I always forget where this is. There it is. So I have to click on this second little face settings button, and then I can click on Xray. And what Xray does is it gives me the basic line view, but it makes it semi-transparent so I can see the back sides of all my cubes. Okay? So I have that established, and I'll go ahead and do the same. File, Export 2D Graphic, and we'll call this Xray. And we'll click on Export. Okay. The options are the same. If I click on them, the sizes are all the same. So once I've done it once, it's always going to be the same. The anti-alias? Just leave the default. It's fine. Alright, so now we'll uncheck Xray. Let's go back and double check what I've got here. Okay, and I appended Xray. Next one, right, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to go back to my first option here under Edit, and I'm going to uncheck Edges and Profiles, right, and everything goes away. Now, what I ask you to do in the little walkthrough is that you're going to turn on guides, to view guides. I don't have any guides on this. So if I turn on guides, it's not going to give me anything. So I'm going to skip that one, right? And I'm going to move down to view shadows. Right? So now I'm going to turn on view and then shadows. Okay? So what I'm getting here is no lines whatsoever, just the shadows. Okay? So that's the important part. So there's no lines, there's no profiles, there's nothing, just the shadows. And I'll go to File and then Export, 2D Graphic, and we'll call this shadows. And I'll go ahead and click on Export, and it'll do that export. Okay, so then I move in to the last little part. I'm going to turn off the shadows. Right, I'm down here now. And I'm going to pick a different style altogether. So let me go ahead and turn off the shadows. Go to View, uncheck Shadows. Right, we could turn edges and profiles back on, that's fine. And I'm going to go back to Select, and I'm going to come down here to Sketchy Edges, and I'm going to pick something called Pen Gray, right, which is right there, which should, come on, right, give me kind of a more stylized version of it. If you don't like Pen Gray, you could pick a different one, right? We could do marker or whatever. When you do the various exports, they look a little different than when you actually come out of SketchUp, or what this preview looks like. So you may end up that you may find that you do a few of these and you decide which one looks best, right? I've had luck with the airbrush with endpoints, this one, which looks rather fat here, but when you do the export, it ends up looking a little bit better. Anyway, it's kind of up to you as to what you pick. The idea is that this is a little bit sketchier version. So I'll go ahead and I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, and since this one was the airbrush, I'm going to call it airbrush. But if I did Pen Gray, I would call it Pen Gray, whatever style it is that works. And actually, since I'm here, I'll go ahead and do the Pen Gray and export it, and then we'll see which one I like better. Right, so let me find, there's Pen Gray. Go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And we'll call this Pen Gray. Alright, and I'll go ahead and click on Export. So, well, ultimately what I'm doing is I'm going to end up combining these into Photoshop so that I get a better sense of what this is going to look like, and I can kind of tweak it. So let me show you first what the kind of the best I could do to approximate it in SketchUp. So I'll turn on my shadows, right? I have this on. I can come over here and I can turn on my Xray a little bit, so we get a little, oh, that's kind of ugly, so maybe I don't end up with the Xray. I end up with something like that. All right, that's kind of okay. So this is about as good as I can get in SketchUp. Right? Then I'm going to show you what we're going to do in Photoshop and the difference. So let me go ahead and save this. I go to Export, 2D Graphic, and we'll call this something like Best from SketchUp. And I'll go ahead and click on Export. And that's just as a reference, so you can see what the best I could do was, and then we'll start working on it in Photoshop. So, now that I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and open Photoshop. And I know it's been a while since you guys were in Photoshop, but you'll remember this stuff pretty fast. Okay? So now, hold on one second. I'm inside Photoshop, and I'm going to go to File, and then Open, and I'm going to pick my first image, which was my lines. And I'll go ahead and click on Open, and that should bring up my lines image. Okay? Then I'll go to File and then Place, and I'm going to bring in each of the rest of the pieces. Right? So the next one I think was Xray, so we'll go ahead and place. Now, if I did this correctly, right, everything should line up right on top of the other. Right? So let's go File, Place, and let's bring in the shadows. Say OK. We'll go to File and then Place, and we'll bring in the Pen Gray. OK. And we'll go to File and then Place, and we're going to bring in the airbrush. And say OK. So you can see there, for example, the airbrush it looks a little different when it comes out in Photoshop. So you have to kind of play around with what's the right look for you. Okay, so over here in the layers, I'm going to turn them all off except for the lines for right now. Let me zoom in slightly so we can see it. All right, and I'm going to turn on the X-ray view. Okay, and remember, actually, I'll show you the shadows view instead because it'll be easier to see this. Remember, right, we wanted the shadows to become, the white areas to become transparent, so we used blending modes to do that before. So I'm going to change the blending mode on this layer from normal to be multiply, right? And now the shadows are going to shine through from the layer onto the lines layer. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for each of these. So I'll turn on the X-ray, and I'll go to multiply. I'll turn on the pen gray, and I'll go to multiply. And I'll turn on this last one, and I'll go to multiply. It gives a little bit stronger. Okay, so you can see, right, I'm starting to build up what this is going to look like. Let me go ahead and for a second I'm going to place in the best I could do from SketchUp so we can flip back and forth and see what that looks like. Okay, so that was the best I could do from SketchUp. You know, it's okay, but if I turn that off, this is where we are in Photoshop now. Okay, so it already looks a little bit better. There's a little bit more depth to it. Okay, now maybe I'm going to decide that my X-ray is a little strong, and this is where I want we have an advantage here, is I can come over to the X-ray, right here, and I can adjust the opacity down, right, until it's just the right amount of X-ray. You guys probably can't even see it, so I'll probably end up doing it stronger than I would in reality. But the point is, you can 2eye adjust that, right? Likewise, if the shadows are too strong, right, we can soften up those shadows a little bit. Okay? But I want to take the shadows a little bit further because I think we can get a little bit more out of the shadows. So I'm going to turn off the rest of these layers, except the shadows for a second. Okay? And I'm going to work using the dodge and burn. And you guys maybe remember back this far in the class, I don't know. If I go to tutorials, Photoshop, right, I'm going to do the dodge and burn 1.5. This one. Right, so you have to go back and kind of remember how I did these. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. So I'll go to Layer, New Layer. And this is going to be an overlay, and it's going to be filled with a neutral 50% gray, and we'll call it dodge and burn. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And when I use the dodge and burn tool, let's go to the burn tool, I'm going to adjust my brush size. It's way too big right now. Okay. I'm going to work with these shadows to kind of darken them up. So for example, I want the top of that shadow to be a little darker. Right, let's keep working on that. Darken that a little bit. And I try to pick the back corners, right, where it would be the darkest, to give a little bit of fade to these shadows. Right? Likewise, I do a little bit up here. And what this is doing, if I turn back on the original background, turn off X-ray. Sorry. There we go. You can see that I'm giving a little bit more depth to these shadows, right? I'm adding a little bit darker to those crisp edges. I'll add a little bit to these. And I'm just making them stand out a little bit more. I'm taking a little bit of extra time on these to be able to get a stronger set of shadows. Maybe I need to make that a little bit bigger. Like that. Right, and then we can darken up in here a little bit more. So I'll take a little bit of time to work through that. Likewise, I could use the burn or the dodge tool here to soften up the shadows as they get a little bit further away, so they're not quite as strong on the ground. So it's a little bit of by eye in terms of getting this set up right, but you can see that I'm already making that stand out a little bit, and I'll show you. There was the before, there's the after. You know, maybe I pushed it a little far, but I'm trying to illustrate the point as I go forward. Right. The other thing here, though, is that this dodge and burn is going to affect all the layers below it right now. So it would also affect the Xray layer, and I don't want it to. So I'm going to do a key shortcut, and I've never figured out where it is in the menu structure to do this. It's Control-Alt-G, and that will take this layer and make it apply just to the layer directly below it. Right? So now it's not going to apply to the Xray layer at all. Okay? So I'll go ahead and continue to kind of layer those up so that I have kind of a nice looking drawing, and you can then compare it side by side with what the best you could get out of SketchUp would be, kind of decide what's the right look. If something is too strong, if one of these layers is too strong, just take the opacity down a little bit and you can soften that up. If something is not strong enough, right, you want more of it shining through, you can duplicate one of these layers and you'll have two that shine together. Okay, so what I'm after today is this final output. So you're going to go to File, Save for Web, and this is then what you're going to post on the course website today. So you're going to do the post-processing in Photoshop. As we go forward in the semester, we will spend more and more time and do more and more Photoshop collage work on top of these. So we'll go through and we'll do elevation, we'll do plans, we'll do elevations, we'll do sections, right? And I'll show you how to do a lot more collage work. This is just kind of the basics of get it into Photoshop and get something out of it. Okay? Are there any questions? No? You got about 40 minutes left to finish this. It shouldn't be too hard. Like I said, you don't have to have a finished cube house, right? However far you got is far enough, right? Just throw those outputs together and put them into Photoshop. All right?